Hello. This video is looking at A Rulebook for Arguments by Anthony Weston, and we're going to be looking at his first rule, resolve premises and conclusions. So, when you're making an argument, you need to ask yourself, what are you trying to prove? What is it that's going to be your conclusion? The conclusion of an argument is a statement that you're giving your reasons for. It's the reason that you're giving the argument. In an argument, your reasons are called premises. I'm going to use that word throughout the rest of these videos. Premises are the reasons that lead to your argument's conclusion. So, now we're going to look at a silly example from the reading. We're going to start with the conclusion, we should eat more beans. So, the question we need to ask ourselves is why? What are my reasons for why I think we should eat more beans? And remember, when you're coming up with your reasons, you need to state good reasons clearly if you're ever going to convince anyone of anything. This is the case with our silly argument here about beans, but also about any other argument that you're trying to give. So, why should we eat more beans? Why? Well, beans are healthy. They're higher in fiber and protein and lower in fat and cholesterol than what most people eat now. That's a pretty good reason. And following from this, a properly supplemented diet of more beans could lead to a longer and more active life. Okay. When you're making an argument, it's best not to assume that everyone knows or takes for granted the same things that you do. So for example, this premise about beans here, about beans being healthy, maybe you know that and you think that it's obvious. But that being said, it's still worth putting in your argument because maybe everybody doesn't know that. Just because it's obvious to you doesn't mean that it's obvious to everyone. So, here we have the first premise of our argument with the conclusion that we should eat more beans. Beans are healthy, higher in fiber and protein, and lower in fat and cholesterol than what most people eat now. That little one next to the premise is a way that philosophers present arguments. We'll see this as we move along through the rest of this argument. Okay, so we have one premise. But what are some other reasons why we should eat more beans? Well, people might think of beans as boring and not interesting, so maybe we can cut off this concern and provide a few contrary examples. Okay, bean dishes can, after all, be varied and exciting. For example, spicy black bean taco filling, that's pretty exciting, and hummus. Hummus can be exciting. And these two recipes are varied as well. Okay, so from this, we have our second premise, represented there by the 2. Bean dishes can also be varied and exciting. For example, spicy black bean taco filling and hummus. Okay, and there's our conclusion, 3. So, we should eat more beans. And at the bottom, we see that a good argument has solid reasons that lead to a clear conclusion. Now, as the reading also mentions, even jokes can be considered arguments, right? So here's a phrase that's intended to be a joke. Living on Earth may be tough, but at least it includes a free ride around the sun every year. Notice, getting a free ride around the sun is still a reason. It's an attempt to justify the claim that life isn't as bad as it sometimes seems. So all of this leads to Rule 1. You should resolve premises and conclusions when working through arguments. So there's 2 definitions of resolve being used here. The first definition of resolve is to distinguish. So you need to resolve your reasons. You need to resolve that your reasons are different than your conclusion. Right? And this is important because you want to keep them separate. The other definition of resolve means to commit to. And similarly, when you're giving any argument, you want to make sure that your premises and conclusion are something that you want to commit to. And if they are, if your reasons and conclusion are something you want to commit to, you should proceed. But if they're not, you should change them. Because after all, it's your argument.